Well, that's loud enough, isn't it? So we're now recording. Hi, my name is Tim Martin with the Falmouth Genealogical Society. This is March 9th. And we're at our monthly meeting at the library. We've invited Debbie Shaw to speak to us. Now it happens that Debbie is chose to join FGS. We're very happy about that. And she's worked with Jewish genealogy. In fact, I'll read her bio. That's more formal. So Debbie Shaw is past president and programming vice president for the Jewish Genealogical Society of Colorado. That's where she's come from to here. She continues to develop creative ways to find and confirm original ancestral first and last names and towns using many techniques. She launched a company, Origen, O-R-I, lowercase, and then a capital G-E-N. And I think I did visit the website in 2018 to accomplish similar results for hundreds of others. Debbie will share practical and strategic ways to find and verify original family names and locations in step-by-step presentation. Now, there is a really useful handout, and you in the Zoom audience, if people, everyone should came to you by email, but I'll drop it into the chat also for people who have missed it. But there's a few copies back there probably that Caroline has if you want a copy of the handout. But Debbie, I think you should come up here and have all the rest of the time.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, and I'll start the, so no, wait, you have a mic right on you.
And
Okay.
this, yeah. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you for showing up on Zoom. This is a presentation that I gave in London in July, but I've modified it so that basically I'm taking the experience that I've had as doing Jewish genealogy, which is pretty tough, to showing you some of those techniques that you can use for non-Jewish ancestry. So that's sort of the goal here. If you have a Jewish line, obviously you can use some of this information that way. But I've tried to modify it to show you that basically the pattern is the same. And I mean, I have a brother-in-law who's of Chinese descent. I've done ancestry for him in Chinese. I know not one symbol in Chinese, but I was in the Salt Lake Library and someone was helping me do it. And so obviously she could speak Chinese, but didn't know anything about genealogy. So we were able to accomplish it that way. So am I hitting the space bar to advance?
Yeah, I think,
Okay.
or the left and right arrow too will work, I know.
Okay.
Over here. No,
Okay,
that works.
great.
Both directions.
So I got interested in genealogy without knowing that word when I was about 10, because this is my grandmother, Dora. This is me. I was raised in Lawrence, Kansas. I lived in the Midwest. I also lived in Boston for 23 years before I moved out to Colorado. But now I'm a grandmother and I have a little grandson. And so we're seeing everything come full circle. But my grandmother used to fly from New York to Lawrence and visit us, and she would speak Yiddish with my mother. And the two words I know in Yiddish that aren't in English are geschlafen, which means go to sleep. Don't listen to what we're saying. It's none of your business. So that became sort of my business. I credit my grandmother for that. Okay, so Tim, I need a little assistance to advance.
Over here. Try that. I need to click here.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So this is my grandmother, the little girl with the bow in her hair is my grandmother. This is the one picture we have of my Sussman ancestors. And the only thing that my grandmother ever told me was that they were from Lithuania. But to be fair, my grandmother's father died when she was 2. And I think a lot of the information was never actually passed on to her. But through various means, let's see, I'm just,
Is that working?
no. Sorry.
Try this. But this is.
Oh,
not
there we
working?
go. Here we go. We're good. So I'm gonna simplify things. I mean, a lot of you know as more than I do about certain parts of genealogy, but to simplify things, when I work with clients, I ask them to really focus on one idea. One question, because it's sort of like if you lose something in your house, if you don't focus on that one thing, you're never going to find it. So, you know, I use Ancestry, I use MyHeritage, I use Family Search, I use lots of different programs, but I really encourage people to back up their data on Family Tree Maker or Roots Magic. And why those two? Because they keep your documents. GEDCOMs do not. GEDCOMs strip your documents away. So I back up everything on Family Tree Maker because it is very compatible with Ancestry, but there's nothing wrong with Roots Magic. And then, like Tim said, Family Search is free. And I really want to encourage you. I'm going to do something at the end to show you how to use unindexed records really fast. It's a little bit of a learning curve, but it's actually not that hard if you start thinking about where your people were from, not what their names were. The place instead of who they are, and then you sort of get into the back door. And then jewishgen.org, I'm going to show you why that's may be important for you. Again, that's a free sign up. You have to register, but you don't have to pay for it. So the handout is extremely dense. There's lots of steps in it. You can use it or not, but it gives you some ideas. It may focus you on some things that you didn't know about. But the one thing that I have to do as a Jewish genealogist is addresses are key. I put addresses everywhere. I have a way of copying and pasting them when I'm doing a census and I see they live at 123 Main Street in Falmouth. That is not going to come through when you save the record. You actually have to key it in to the place. It'll say Barnstable County probably, but you would have to actually key it in to the first person, let's say the head of household. I copy and paste it, but you have to key it the first time. So then you're getting it for all the people that appear on that census. So if I don't do that, I can not verify if I've got the right people. And so that's one thing that is essential for me doing this work, and it's not a bad idea for other people. So I'm just showing you this map because if you have, this is the Pale of Settlement in Eastern Europe. This is where a lot of Jewish immigrants came from, but I'm going to show you in Jewish Gen that if your family came from any of this area, Jewish or not, you will have some assistance in town names. I'm going to show you that in a minute. You may not get your records here, but you could get your town names.
You need to share your screen to the Zoom audience.
Okay.
Apologize for them. Is this the bed? Hide video panel. Hide floating meeting controls. There we go.
Okay.
Hopefully it'll still work.
All right.
And just tell the Zoom audience.
So now
I'm
to
sorry,
Okay.
that they missed the first few slides.
Okay, so don't worry about any of this. I'm just showing you a pattern here. I'm just showing you that in a case like this where, you know, people say they came from Hungary. This is the same family. I'm going to show you straight through here. You know, in the 1900, 1910 census, women were asked, how many children did you have and how many are still alive? I've gotten a lot of good information on looking up death records for babies. There could be birth records, but if that baby died soon after birth, there will not be a birth record. I mean, there could be, but I was always looking for birth records, and the death records are where I found things. So here, this family now says they're from Austria, same family, the Schwartz family. In 1910, there's one child that had died in that decade. The address is the same. They're German speaking. So this is giving me an idea that this family is not unclear where they're from, but they're probably from Galicia, Austria-Hungary, at that time. And this is probably where I'm going to find them. And as we know, with any census record, you're looking at borders, you're looking at grandparents that might have been living with them. That's how you often get a woman's original name, unmarried name, because maybe her father or mother is living with them, which I'll show you in a few minutes. Again, we're just following the same family through. We're watching that they have the same address. And when I go to find this family, I'm going to have a lot more information about where they're likely from, but not absolutely. It's a clue. Also on the census records, they always indexed as Russia. They didn't come from Russia. Russia occupied the Pale of Settlement. You need to look at what the original country was. And in this case, they often said where they were from. They said Riga. Riga's in Latvia. Okay, so that gives you a huge clue if this is your person. In the case of endogamous communities, people that lived very close together, like a lot of Jewish communities in Eastern Europe, they married cousins. I swore this wasn't true in my family, and it's 75% true, unfortunately, but it is. So, and I'm not saying that, I'm saying you look where people are living close to each other, they may be related, whether they're married or not. And by researching those lines that you're not interested in, you often get the information you're looking for. So this is a case, this I did not present in London, but this is a family, immigrants from Italy, and we find them in California in 1945, where this Telerik guy marries a woman called Ruth Honeycutt. So she states on the marriage record that her father is from Tennessee. So when we go back to the census records in 1900, we find a lot of Honeycutts in this particular county, Summer, Tennessee. This is 1900, so this is just the 1900 census. I'm finding a lot of them. I'm just showing you that different pages of the census, they're all living really close together. And eventually we find her guy, Harvey. Harvey is 12 years old in 1900, and he's living with his family next to lots of other relatives, no doubt. And in 1910, we find him in California. But this is a migration issue thing. He obviously, well, probably migrated to California, moved to California from Tennessee, but he did that with other people that he knew, some of which had the same last name and some didn't. And they're working as laborers in Stanislaus, California. And how do we know that this is definitely him? We find him very soon with his wife, Grace. We saw that Grace was the mom on that marriage record, or sorry, the bride, and her name was Grace Johnson. So they're living with Willard Johnson. It says the father, usually it's not the father of the man in this case. Sometimes they get that wrong. It probably should have said father-in-law, but we get the idea here. So now going back to the sort of things that I'm looking for, I'm always looking for immigration records, and I'm always mapping everything I find. So many people changed their names when they came to the US, not at Ellis Island. That's a whole different story. If you go to Italy on your passport next week, you're not coming back with a different name unless you buy a different passport to get back over. They had to have papers too. Did some people buy papers and falsify them? I'm sure they did. But for the most part, when they got off the ship, they had to have something that matched where they got on. Whether it was true or not, okay. But for the most part, you're seeing somebody who, as soon as they get here, they're not going to be happy, or they're going to be teased if they're called Labe. So they changed their name to Lewis in this case. So this guy is immigrated in 1905. He was 16. And is this my relative? Is this my Berman relative? I don't know, but he's saying that he's from this particular little town, this little village in Belarus, and he's going to this uncle at this address on 9th Ave in New York. So that's very important because now I'm going to go look for those records and figure out if that's really my person or not. So now to go into Jewish Gen, this is the part that's important for everyone, is the town finder. So the town finder will let you type things in a SoundX version. You can spell it wrong, you can type it the best you can. I mean, they were all doing the best they could. They were coming from a different language set, and they were sounding it out and trying to make it work in English, which it didn't always happen so easily. So this town is actually very close to where I know my Berman relatives are from, which is Vishneva and Voloshin. And so when I go to Google Maps and put that in, you can see that this town is very close. Were they absolutely related? I don't know yet, but at least we know they were basically in the same part of the world. And Jewish Gen does have records that have been translated. This is similar to a US census record. They called them revision lists. They, you know, I mean, they did them for all kinds of reasons throughout the Pale of Settlement, but they did, you know, sometimes you can find a whole census list that matches just the way you would in the US. So here's another way to get good information is all males were required to register for World War I and World War II, whether they served or not, and they were asked where they were from. And in this case, they tended to be more accurate than on the census, partly because, well, I don't know why, but on the census, they didn't press it. And, you know, this guy is saying very clearly which town he's from in Galicia, Austria. So when we go to the town finder and put that word in, we get these choices. And we can figure out pretty quickly, you know, they're telling you how to say that town in lots of different languages: Yiddish, Polish, Russian, Lithuanian. So if you heard something from a grandparent about the name of their town, you might be able to sound it out and figure out that it's accurate or not. Or if you have other information. I always map things. I always want to see where the place is, because then you're gonna get clues if you start doing that, or it allows you to think about it in a different way. This is where it is in the world. Again, we have in this case, we have two people coming over. They're in their 20s. They're coming from Stanislaw. Where is that? I don't know. But if I put it in Jewish Gen, I'm going to get some clues as to where it's from. And it's most likely that first one. But again, you have to do more research to figure that out. This is a situation where somebody on their draft registration just said they were from Lithuania. Well, at least that gets you something. But on his declaration, he said he was from Abelnink. So Abelnink is in Lithuania. Okay, so here again, he's saying he's from Abelnink. He's living in Boston. And if you put that name in, then you get Vabalninkas. So Vabalninkas is definitely in Lithuania. Again, these are clues. You're going to need more evidence on everything, as we do, but we've got him centered in the world, and now maybe I can find records in this town, in this region, in Jewish Gen. This is one of my relatives that I was not researching. He's my grandmother's older brother. This particular record was done in 1917 for World War I. He unfortunately died in the next year, not from the war. He got kicked in the head by a horse, apparently. But he's the one person in her family who actually said where they were from. Savinishek in Kovno. Kovno is a gubernia, a region in Lithuania, and it's Suveniskas in Lithuanian. And that's very close. It's within 10 kilometers from my other town, Pandalys. I've been to Lithuania a couple of times. I've been to these two towns. I've been to the cemeteries. It's very cool to be there, as you know, if you're in the place where your people came from. And when I was in Suveniskas in 2016, we could not find the cemetery. So it's a very long story about how I got there and how I'm with a fourth cousin of mine who's married to someone who's Lithuanian. So I did have an advantage in that she spoke Lithuanian and I was traveling with them. But we met a woman who, she was cooking dinner. And we asked, my friend asked her where the cemetery was. And she did this sort of convoluted thing. And we looked blankly and she said, she sighed, she put down her cooking utensils, she got on her bike and she said, "Follow me." And we followed her in the car slowly, and she took us through this circuitous place through into the woods, and that's where the cemetery was. And so I photographed all of those stones. There were 78 of them. However, they were from the 20s and 30s, but they did not have last names on them. So but anyway, this is a declaration of intention. So again, if you can get to these, you're going to find AKA, also known as, you know, they had to say, this guy was actually in Canada. His name was Harold Chaikin, but we knew him as Chase. And he states that he was formerly a Chaikin. So that's where we're going to have to be looking for records and first name as well, because most likely that wasn't his first name when he emigrated. But we also find alien certificates of him crossing the border between Canada and the US. A lot of I swore my relatives did not come through Canada either. It was sometimes cheaper to come through Canada. And I have a situation where a man had immigrated first. They left their 4 daughters with the grandmother, and the grandmother took the 4 daughters on the ship with her under her name, because you can imagine if you're traveling with your grandchildren, you don't want to be questioned about why you have a different name from your charges. And then the mother came later through Canada. Why? Because apparently she had glaucoma and she thought she would be sent back. And she did not want to be sent back if she had 4 little kids with her. So she made sure that the grandmother got the daughters over to her husband, and then she traveled 6 months later and did not get sent back. So I'm just going to quickly show you a little case study here. This is an ancestor. This is a situation where, you know, I'm seeing, this is all I know. I know that these people were all in the US, Altermans. They're in New Hampshire. That's all I know. I don't know anything else. But I find that this guy, Nathan Alterman, you know, he had a petition for naturalization, and he says that he traveled under the name of Nota Elterman. So there's no way that I'm ever going to be able to find his immigration records, his original records overseas, unless I know that original name. So there it is. He, and also if you've got a number of kids traveling together, or kids and parents or whatever, you can sometimes get that entryway through one person, because the names were changed in such a way that you would never guess what the other ones were. But this one is pretty clear that that was him. There's the indexed version of that. He came over when he was 4, and he came over with these siblings. And I could not find his siblings until I found him. So they're with their mom, Sarah, and then a sister, Frida, Moisha, Simka, and him, Nota. The 4-year-old is at the bottom. So now you know what the original names were for the siblings and the mom. And as was common, that, you know, sometimes, a lot of times, the head of household, the man, came first and tried to establish things and sent for his family later. There's the town that they said they were from. So that is the name of the town in Belarus today. And so that's where I would find then records. I could find records on Jewish Gen of them, but I'm just showing you that that's the entryway. And I tried those other ways. I'm not showing you, all know that we sit for hours. This looks really easy, right? But you know, I was trying the other kids until I got to that youngest one, and then I got the whole family. So I moved to England in 1979 with $500 and a one-way ticket. And I had graduated college. I didn't want to live in the US. I guess I shouldn't be saying this online, but I lived in England for a while and I worked over there. And I met a woman that's still my friend today. And this is her family. And so I heard a lot about them. So because I was in London, I really had to do something that was English based. And so what I did is I took her family and I said, look, I'm going to spend an hour. This is what I don't know where her family's from. Her family doesn't really care and they have all kinds of stories and we'll see if any of them are true. So on her, so Gilbert is her father and Alice is her mom. And they met in London. They've lived in London a long time. So I'm using Find My Past. This is the English Register from 1939. This register is really important because they put women's original names on it. And someone in London just now told me that that was had to do with some kind of a war effort. They did not do that on other census records in England, but this one they did. And so these are Gilbert's parents, Sarah and Leah. They're living in the East End in London. And we see that we can get women's original names here because they crossed them out for, it might have been the National Health that they were doing this. And again, you can read about what the registers have. But this is their family. This is Gilbert and Alice, and then their daughter Melanie and her husband Lau. So Gilbert always told his daughters stories of Biala Cherkov. And so his kids thought that it was kind of like Fiddler on the Roof, a made up name. And so finally, when I did this, I said to Sue, you got to just say this to me again. But Biala Cherkov is actually the name of a town in the Ukraine. And so at first, when I got to this, I'm thinking, well, that might have been his town. It might not have been. He was a big jokester. I don't know if he really knew this or not, but that's the town he always said when we asked him. And so his mother's name was Rudinsky. There's the location in the Ukraine today. And so now I'm going into Jewish Gen. I'm going to search for Biala Cherkov, that town, that little village, and his mother's name, Rudinsky, and I get a lot of records. A lot of records came up, and I actually found that family, that exact family in a census record, in a revision list from 1897. So that gives us confirmation that he was repeating something that he'd heard as a kid, and it wasn't wrong. A lot of people don't tell us the right things, which I'll show you in a minute how, but there's an element of truth usually to what people are telling us. And then on Alice's side, her mom's side, there's the actual record in Cyrillic. This is the good thing about Family Search. You can actually, this is a hot link. You can pull this record, you can post it online, and you can say to somebody, can you translate this for me? Because maybe they didn't translate everything in the stuff that I was showing you. So on Alice's side, she was in the East End. I'm starting out and Find My Past. I find her father very quickly. The story with her mother is that they were from Ireland. And every time they told me this, I'm like, I don't think so. But maybe, but okay, you're from Ireland. So here's her father, Samuel Michaels. And I see quite a few records for him. And I also see that he was a soldier in 1904 in Belfast. So he was in Ireland, but are they from Ireland? No. So here's his service record. He was stationed in Northern Ireland, which was, occupied by the UK, however you want to say that. I don't want to get political here, but here's him, a lot of newspaper articles about him. This is all from Find My Past. And I can see on census records, Yetta Michaels, a relative of his. And now I'm going back to Ancestry because I couldn't find anything more in Find My Past. So now I took what I knew from Find My Past and I went into Ancestry and I found a 1901 English census, okay? And now I'm seeing that Michaels family, Humphrey Michaels, his wife Sarah, and all those children, but who are they living with? They're living with a mother-in-law called Rosa Donat, an uncle, Levy, and Hannah Donat. Okay, so now I'm going to go back further and I'm going to try to find that family. Here's the son. Here I see them again. The Michael's family are living with some Donat relatives. That's 1911. There they are. So they're together over a decade anyway, 1901 to 1911. And then going back to 1871, you can see that Sarah, in this case, was a child. And that here's where they say where they're from. They're from Amsterdam. And when I told her family this, they were like, oh, yeah, we've heard that. Okay, well, all right, so maybe I'm not wrong, but you didn't tell me that, and this is how we got to that. Okay, so they're saying they're from Holland. This is, they must have immigrated before 1871 because they're in England at this point. But you're getting your way back because we saw that they were living with relatives at a later time in England. And then on the other side, so now we have the people in the green at the top, you're seeing, I didn't know any of those before I did this. And this literally took me about 2 hours. I wasn't going to spend more time than that on this. And that's who we have now. So we know that that generation has been filled in and we can go back farther now. And we get school records. This is from Find My Past. I just want to show you that there's a lot of records like that sort of thing. And the naturalization records in Britain look different than the US ones, but they basically give you the same information. They're telling you who the parents are, what their birth dates were, who their kids are, because they're applying for naturalization after they've lived in that country. In England, same with the US, you had to live here for a while. Many people had children by the time they applied, and then they have to state who they were, even though those children were citizens. Okay, so I'm just going to plot this out for them. That side of the family was from Poland. So basically, and that's where it is, it's northwest of Warsaw. And then basically I can show them a path that this is basically where that side of the family was from, Poland and Amsterdam. And the other side was from the Ukraine, Bielorussia. I'm just going to go through the family search thing since we've been talking about that. So I actually did not, I'll state this publicly. There's a bias in the Jewish genealogical community about family search. So I was not using it. And then I went to Roots Tech because I lived in Colorado. I went to Roots Tech a few years ago and I was blown apart by that. And it is amazing. And their talks online are very worth watching, especially if you can, there's a link in the handout for a guy who does a really good talk on using unindexed records. If you learn how to use unindexed records, you will find your family. It's amazing. And so I've become fairly good at doing that. I'm just going to show you very quickly. This is not to teach you how to do anything. It's just to change your mindset and to be motivational. Because I think we're all looking for names, and that's great. If you can find them that way, terrific. But we often can't, and then you have to go to place. And if your people were in, say, Cleveland, here's an example of Cleveland. Again, forget about who they were. You're in Cleveland now. There's all kinds of record sets in there, but to start, you can go to the vital records. Okay, and let's just say that your great-grandparents were married in Cleveland. You know the rough year. You may not know the actual year, but you got an idea of what it is. And then you will see record sets, and within those record sets, they are indexed in a handwritten way for the most part. Not always, but you'll see at the very beginning, they will tell you if they had an alphabetical index, you will see it. And if your grandparents' last name was Smith, you're going to go to the S's. And then you've already cut down on what you're looking for. And within the S's, they may not be alphabetized right, or they might be. But I've found many records this way, and you can often find land deeds, probate records, wills, lots of things that are scanned, but they are not digitally indexed yet, except that, you know, what Tim was saying about AI, they probably will be to some degree relatively soon. And so I was just showing that this is for London, but obviously we can go to Katomet and look up records there. So what I do, and I'll just go to the end of this, I do this. So I collect my data before I go into a family search center. So if I'm interested in this, you can either take a picture of it, you can have a printout, it doesn't matter, but what you're looking for on these records here, you can see an FHL number, right? So that first one, it's almost toward the end. So it's a birth certificate from Cook County. That's what I want. So I saw this index on Ancestry, but I want the actual birth record because I want to know what their parents' names were and where they were from, etc. The other one is, the next one is a will, and the one on the other side is a death record. So you definitely want the original records because you're going to get much more information. So if you go into a family search center and make an appointment, so let's say with Betsy, and bring in the things that you're looking for, that's all you're doing there. You're not trying to do the research there. You're just trying to be present in a place that has unlocked records, and then you can pull the record onto your flash drive or print it out, or both. Okay, that's the one in London. This is I just put this up there because my mom, who was amazing, you know, my mom just wasn't a big descriptive person. And she told me for a long time, I have something in the closet for you. Okay, like a coat? No, when you come, I'll show you. Okay. So eventually she was living in Lincoln. I was living in Nebraska. I was living in Boston. I said, Mom, you have something in the closet for me? Oh, yeah, I'll show you that later. I said, well, what is it? And eventually she shows me this stack of papers. It wasn't a jacket, it was a stack of papers. And she had found a 1,000-page newsletter about my family. I'm like, Mom, you could have told me that on the phone. Oh, no, I wanted you to see it. And so I've digitized that. I have OCR'd it. It is, if your family is from this area, and even if they're not, a lot of it is, you know, their way of life, how they lived. They did this newsletter every 2 weeks for 5 years. But it's also so-and-so went to Atlantic City last week, etc. So I give this away if anyone wants it. So I'll stop here and ask for questions, comments.
Put you back on the screen here for the, if I can figure out how. Escape, stop, share. Thank you very much. You want to. No. Okay, let's just leave it at that. Oh, yeah, here we go. So, you know, I wanted to comment, you mentioned Find My Past a fair bit. And remember me talking about the premium content that was available at family search centers? Find My Past is one of the examples. There's quite a list. So I'm just kind of, this is new and exciting for us that this family search center is here. Now, we don't want to inundate Betsy, but, well, you know, but it's this very exciting to have this family search center here locally. You know, and then you know, oftentimes on these census records, like you showed us that example where Riga was crossed out. And what's your sense or understanding of what, in that case, like even speak to that case, why do you think Riga was crossed out there?
Well, they weren't indexing that. They didn't want to know. So for whatever reason, they wanted the political geographic part of the world at that time. They didn't want the specific part. So it gets in there sometimes because someone said Poland or Riga or Vienna, and it gets written down. It doesn't mean they were from Vienna. You might say you were from Boston and you're really from the South Shore or the Cape, but at least it gets you into the right part of the world. But they didn't want that. They were not indexing that. So they didn't change the printed version, but they also didn't index it.
So who even is making those marks?
Oh, the census taker wrote down what they heard. Who
Okay.
crossed it out? I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
that's what I'm wondering. Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Okay. Yes.
And sometimes they do have the actual little village. I found places where they've written it 16 times because there were so many people, but at least having written it that many times, it gives you a better shot at figuring out what the vowels were they were writing.
Yeah, right.
The Zoom audience.
We come not from the Pale, but from other places.
Just a minute, Ralph. We need to put you on a microphone. Dottie's coming. This is for the Zoom audience. Go ahead.
Okay, now I'm mic'd.
Yeah.
But my name isn't Mike. Anyway. Sometimes we find people from different parts of the world, not the Pale, with some village like this that they're from. Does this Jewish Gen site cover other parts of the world other than
Well, so
Eastern
Jewish,
Europe?
yes, they do. Yes, definitely. They cover South Africa, Australia. There's all kinds of different areas in the world. Yes,
Would they cover Ireland?
probably not.
Yeah, there's probably another site that covers.
But I'm going to
Ireland
tell you something
places.
about, I have a client who was sure that her grandfather went to Argentina, and we had some proof that he did, but she couldn't find his grave. And so she called me last week and said, I'm going to focus on this for the next week. I said, okay, because that's probably the best thing that's going to happen is her focus. And by doing that, she followed up with some relatives. She had me do a few things. I looked up some information, and a cousin sends her an email and said, I already gave this to your genealogist, was said with a little snark. So I said, okay, well, I've never seen this, but this is helpful because it's actually the gravestone. And I can tell you that the Hebrew says he's the son of the same person that his brother is the son of in the next gravestone. So we're making progress. We know where that cemetery is. We know that we can contact them. And you know that you all know that an archivist is kind of like us. They'll give you 5-10 minutes of looking at something that they have that we don't, because they're really curious too. So they're going to go to their own databases and say, okay, I'll send somebody out to photograph that grave next Wednesday because I've got somebody working on that side of the cemetery. I'm telling you, this is what they did for my grandmother. When I was looking for my mother's, so all I'm saying is that focus got her the information within a week. So the same with Ireland. And the only reason I'm saying that is like my mother was from Connecticut. She's from Willimantic. So I'm always thinking Connecticut. Connecticut's kind of difficult to deal with. And one day I was sitting down looking at this and thinking, no, but she got married in Woonsocket. And Woonsocket is not in Connecticut. But I just was thinking always Connecticut. So I called someone in Rhode Island, and a very straightforward woman said, what's your phone number? You can have my phone number. I'll call you back within 5 days. Like, fat chance, but okay, you've got my phone number. But she did call me back and she said, now listen, I'm going to tell you exactly what to do. And this is what you need to do. Write this down. You're going to go to Pawtucket. You're going to go down a back alley, up some steel staircases. You're going to go knock on the door. You're going to ask for the copy of the divorce certificate, and you better have a lot of quarters in your pocket. This is what she said. This was about 7, 8 years ago. So I was living in Colorado. I flew out here to see my son. I drove down to Pawtucket. It was a sketchy back alley in Pawtucket. I walk up these stairs. I knock on the door, and it's a clerk's office somewhere in the middle of Pawtucket. And she said, yeah, it's right here. I've got your grandmother's divorce decree. Can I see it? No. Well, could I photocopy it? Only if you've got quarters. And so I said, yeah, I've got quarters. And so she said, I'm going to watch you. The photocopy machine is right there. Don't you dare take it. I said, okay. I just want to photocopy it. But basically that woman told me exactly what to do and that I would be met with this kind of response. But I did get a copy of her divorce decree. And, you know, my grandmother was, I loved my grandmother. She was amazing, but she was also a bit dramatic. And she accused my grandfather of throwing a teacup at her and missing and hitting the wall one time. And I'm like, was that the time that he found out you were having an affair? I don't know. But anyway, my point is that when I go to talks, I mean, nobody can really tell you what to do, but the motivational part of it is that I'm pretty sure if you get really focused on whatever it is, you'll make a call to Ireland, or you'll contact an expert, or if you had relatives in Boulder, I would tell you who the expert is in Boulder, because she knows everybody and everything about that town. Because I'm pretty sure if you focus on that and try find my past and different websites, that you will get to it. But yeah, there's always complications of people having the same names and you're not really sure who's who.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Zoom audience. Zoom audience, do you have any questions?
Okay. Sorry.
Okay. You know, I think it's so true. This notion of go to the town is so powerful.
Mhm.
I mean, that is so true. Talk to the locals, connect with the town, and it's just phenomenal what you can uncover.
So I went to Bosra, Connecticut, which is where how do you say it? Thank you, Bosra. And I sat in the town clerk's office looking through land records for maybe an hour. I did get land records that my family had there. But you just get a real sense of what's going on there if you're in that actual town. And I don't know if you've had this experience, but I think there's a way that genealogy comes around in a way that people don't even realize. So I don't talk about it with my kids, or I mean, I talk about it sometimes, but they just blank. Their heads, you know, they're done. But the person I've most connected with is my great grandfather, who I said died when my grandmother was 2. And I found his records because, again, you have to think of someone speaking with a thick Yiddish accent. And he died he died within 4 years of coming to the US. And they put his name on his death certificate as Lewis. Okay, his name was Julius, but you can see how that could be misunderstood. I don't think anyone meant to make that mistake, but that's what they heard. And so when my kids told me they were naming my grandson that name, I was shocked, because I don't even know that I've ever said that. And that's what they named him. And then more recently, my niece had a baby in October, and She was born on Friday, October 13th. And my only uncle happened to die on that very day. He was 92. And they named this baby Mackenzie, but they call her Kenny. And my uncle's name was Kenny. And he died on the day that she was born. And no one planned that or, but somehow there's this sort of energy about it that comes through. I mean, I just look for those patterns, and to me, that's very interesting. But, and I've had, like, my grandfather obviously died before he was 50, so he never had a full life. But it's like his life is somehow being relived because of that. So, I mean, that's just something I think about. But anyway, any more questions? Anybody from the Zoom audience? Okay, thank you
That's
very much.
very good. I'm gonna